I'm Joe Daniel from JoeDanielFootball.com. Today we're going to be talking about the fundamentals of coaching wide receivers to run better routes. Today we're going to be talking about route running and specifically which parts of the route you need to coach and how to break down those parts of the routes in coaching. So we're not going to talk about any one route, how to coach it, but just an overall philosophy as a receivers coach, as a coordinator, as a head coach. How do you get your receivers to run the best possible routes so that we can get our guys open, get the timing down with the quarterback, all the things that are important in wide receiver route running. One of the things that is really frustrating sometimes is, wide receiver, especially inexperienced wide receiver coaches, there's a lot more focus on, hey, he caught the ball or he didn't catch the ball. To whereas if we're going to become really great as a passing offense, we have to be particular about the details. So we're going to get into several things about wide receiver route running. We're going to talk about alignment, which is important in setting up the route before it even starts. We'll also talk about receiver stance. We'll talk about release off the line of scrimmage, how to run the steps of the route so that they time up with the quarterback, getting into our break, and finally how to finish the route as well with the catch at the end. Wide receiver route running involves all of these different aspects, and you can go deeply into every single one of them. And if you're going to be a wide receivers coach, you really need to study your craft. You really need to look deeply into, stance, press releases, breaks, all of these things. So we're going to talk about how to break down the route. If you're going to be a good wide receivers coach, you're going to want to study every single one of these aspects in depth and as far as how they fit into your particular offensive system. First of all, let's talk about wide receiver alignment. So this is the basics of wide receiver coaches. First of all, one of the biggest frustrations for an offensive coordinator, for a head coach, for an offense in general, is if the receivers don't know who's on and who's off. Now, this seems like it's obvious. It's not. Kids don't know these rules. So when you're working with high school, you're working with middle school, you're working with youth kids, they don't know these rules. And the most frustrating thing in the world is before the route is even run, before the play even starts, you've got a receiver covered up and he's going to be ineligible downfield, or you've got not enough guys on the line of scrimmage and the play is dead before it even starts. So number one, know who's on and who's off and make sure that your receivers, tight ends, H-backs, anybody like that understands the rules as far as covered and uncovered receivers, who's on, who's off, and all that goes into that. It's not as easy as it seems. As far as wide receiver splits, one of the problems that we get is, a lot of times we're practicing on a field that is not lined. And so we can't say line up on the hash, line up on the numbers, line up on some landmark on the field because our field is destroyed. Our practice field doesn't even have lines on it. It's destroyed. We teach our receivers to line up based on a distance from the end man on the line of scrimmage. So what we're looking for here is 12 yards is a normal split. If we want to go with a tight split, then it's going to be about 8 to 10 yards, and a wider split is going to be 14 to 16 yards. Now, why do we use these? Well, our normal split is for normal routes, our curl route, a go route, a hitch route. These are normal routes. They don't require anything different as far as the break. When we go with an in-breaking route, like a slant route, we may want a wider alignment. A dig route, we're going to want a wider alignment. So we may go to 14 to 16 yards. This is all going to be a part of not only your base route, so this is chalkboard type of stuff, but also we're going to be working on this in our game plan and how it's going to affect the coverages that our opponent uses. If you're going to be running an outside breaking route like a deep out or a speed out, you may want to tighten down the split of your wide receivers to 8 to 10 yards. All of these things can be seen, and all of these things, one thing you'll want to remember in setting up your routes is if you run a very obvious split, you're going to want to have an answer if you see that the defense is adjusting to it. For example, you tighten down your split to run a deep out and the DB positions himself now to play the deep out. You're going to want to have an out and up to take advantage of that if he tries to jump the out. Second key part of wide receiver route running is the stance. So the stance is where we can lose a step really quick. A half step in our timing is going to be extremely important. We need to teach our receivers to set up their weight distribution, set up their arms, however they're going to start their route. A lot of receivers need to take a little false step or a little movement in order to get themselves going. And this is something you want to work on, is getting a stance where the receiver can release directly off the ball. This is hard to teach, and you'll see in a lot of the clips that we have that our receivers are kind of sinking the hips to get off the line or taking a false step to get off the line. And it does cost a half step in the timing. Timing is critical. The steps have to time up with the quarterback steps in order to get the ball to arrive to the receiver on time. And having a stance where the weight isn't distributed properly can really throw things off. We also need to make sure that receivers know which foot is up and which foot is back, because if they have the wrong foot back, it's going to throw off the route steps. We always put the outside foot back in our stance, and that way if we're running an outside breaking route, it's going to be an even number of steps, and inside breaking route, it's going to be an odd number of steps. So a deep out is going to break at 8, the 8th step being the break, and a curl is going to be a 9-step curl. So they're a little bit different there. That's going to be really important in route timing as well. Now from the stance, I want to mention wide receiver releases. So releases are going to depend a lot on what you're trying to run, what routes you're trying to run, but you need to work on releases both against off coverages and against press coverages, especially against press coverages. What we find is that a lot of receivers spend a ton of time working on routes on air. They run routes on air, routes on air, routes on air, and they get that timing down with the quarterback. When you put a DB up in their face in press coverage, it can really throw off the timing. So you've got to make sure that you've worked with your receivers on press coverage releases so that they can get off the line and get the route run on time to still be in sync with the quarterback. You also want to have plans for route releases against off defenders so that you can get into a position to take an inside or outside path that you need to get so that you can make your breaks in order to get into the quarterback's vision, and also so that you can have a plan for stacking receivers on vertical routes. Now, a fourth critical part of route running is the steps, and this is probably the most critical part as far as the timing of the routes. And I'm a big believer in timing routes and getting the routes to time up perfectly with the quarterback's footwork. So we're going to have 5-step routes for 3-step quick game. We're going to have 7-step routes for 5-step quarterback drops. Now we take 2 steps off if the quarterback's in the shotgun or the pistol. So if it's a pistol quick game, it's going to be 1 step, but the receiver's still taking 5. So they just have to know, based on what you're throwing, what their route steps are going to be. All of our routes are not run exactly at 7 or 5. We include the break in a lot of our routes so that they time up correctly. But this is really, really important that they take the right number of steps. What happens, again, as receivers get somebody pressure in their face or something's happening in the game or they start to get tired, those steps aren't happening. You've really got to hammer the steps, because if they cut the steps off, which happens a lot during the course of a game with young receivers, they start to run routes, get overexcited about trying to get open or trying to make something happen, try to get into their break too fast, and the route doesn't time up. If the route doesn't time up, they make their break, and by the time the quarterback is ready to throw the ball, he goes to deliver, and it gives the DB way too much time to close down on the route. So they've got to make sure that they're taking all of their steps. If we're doing that correctly, then the ball should be in the air when they break, especially on a curl route. The ball should be in the air as they're coming back to it. A hitch route, the ball should be in the air as they're coming to it. A slant route, as they're hitting their break and hitting the window on that slant, we should be delivering the football to them. So their steps have got to time up, and you've got to spend a lot of time focusing on your receiver steps and counting receiver steps. If you have a dedicated wide receiver coach during practice who can actually spend time and look at this, and he doesn't need to be your offensive coordinator or you're running your defensive scout team or something, if you can really focus in on this, you can get a ton out of having that guy focus on counting the steps of your wide receivers and making sure that they're getting their routes timed up properly. Another big aspect of taking the steps on the route is that we sell vertical on all of our stems. So on all of our 5-step and 7-step stems on our routes, we want to make sure that the receiver's eyes are up, that he's selling that he's going to be running vertical. If you see guys running with their eyes down, looking at the ground, looking for that spot where they're going to cut, or their eyes are down counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, then you know they're about to cut, and that DB is not going to be fooled into playing over top on a deep route. Another critical part of coaching your wide receivers to run better routes is coaching the break. So we're going to spend a ton of time working on the break because it's part of the timing. Now, however you do your breaks is going to depend on the routes and depend on what type of system that you're running. Some people run, for example, a curl route as a post into a dig. Some people run it as coming back down to the quarterback, almost like a deeper hitch. There's lots of different ways to run almost every route. And whatever you're going to do, you've got to really take time to coach that break so that the timing and so that the position of the receiver matches up with what the quarterback is expecting. There are little parts of the break that you can work on, like sinking the hips to come back on a break or to break a sharp break, and then running through a break if you want, say, a speed out or a deep out. Those are aspects that you want to work on, but also you want to spend time working on the steps in the break. We run a 9-step curl. I mentioned that. Now that's a 7-step stem and then 2 small steps and then coming back to the quarterback. So you want to spend a lot of time working on that. Our deep out is a speed cut. So we run a 7-step stem and then running through the cut with the 8-step crossing over in order to run the deep out. So both of those are going to be 7-step routes, but they're completely different breaks that we're going to have to spend a lot of time working on. The way that we like to work on breaks is we like to work on the break as a piece of the route. So you're going to really not get as many reps on the break as you need if you run the full routes all the time. So if all you ever do is work on your curl route and you run 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and back to the quarterback the way that we run it, you're really going to be taking a long time to get enough reps. So what we'll do is we will start this on the 5th step. So we will just get 6, 7, 8, 9. So we'll say, hey, when we start this, you're already on step 5. 6, 7, 8, 9, break. So all we're working is big, big, little, little, back to the quarterback. Big, big, little, little, back to the quarterback. Now I can do this and get a lot of reps with a lot more receivers, get a lot more opportunities to run the top of the route by pulling out the break rather than just running a curl, running a slant, running a fade, running any of those things as a whole route where I'm going to really cut down on the number of opportunities I get. In the same token, if we want to work on steps, I will have receivers just run 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I just want to see you consistently release off the ball and run 7 steps or run 5 steps, depending on the routes you're working on. At that point, you've completed the route, but there's going to be a lot of times where the play isn't over. So you do want to work with your receivers on things like scramble drill, on finding open windows. If you run your curl route and you sit and there's a DB sitting right in front of you, don't just stand there. Slide to get open, slide to find the windows, slide to the soft spot if you're running a hitch. Knowing how to work a fade route at the top of the route, how to create separation on your routes, how to stack the DB. These are all parts of route running that are more advanced, but very important if you're going to be running a successful passing game. I think if you get the timing down on the routes above all else, and then also work on releases so that, say, a press doesn't completely throw off your passing game. If you get the timing down, then you're going to have a much more successful passing game. And if you're a timing-based team, you don't have to have that great, strong-armed quarterback. If he'll deliver the ball on time where he's supposed to deliver it, if he can make good decisions, he doesn't have to have the strongest arm in the world, and you can still get the ball down the field and run a complete passing attack. Now, all of the routes that we've talked about in this video are a part of the Pistol Power Offense System passing game. Of course, they all go into different passing concepts. We have a very simplistic but complete passing system that you can use for your offense, even if you aren't running the Pistol Power Offense System. And you can check that out by going to pistolpoweroffense.com. And there's a link down in the description below here. I hope this video has given you some ideas on coaching your wide receivers and on getting a better passing game for your offense. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe and like this video. It certainly helps to get more exposure for JoeDanielFootball.com and this channel, so I greatly appreciate it. To subscribe to this channel, there's a button right over here, and over here are a couple more videos that you can use to help out your team's passing attack. And for all you wide receiver coaches out there, down in the comments, I'd love to hear some of your best techniques for coaching wide receivers, so just leave a comment below. That's it. Thanks for watching.